Parshas Beshalach. This week's share has been kindly sponsored. Le'ilu Nishmas Rabbavam Ben Reb Shlomo. If you wish to sponsor a future share or episode, please be in touch. On a personal note, I want to thank those of you who did get in touch, listeners, viewers, to give me feedback. It genuinely encourages me to continue, so thank you for all of that. Parshas Beshalach, we're at the final stage of the process of Geulas Mitzrayim. We've actually made it. And the Parsha begins, Vayihi Beshalach Paroi Esa'om V'loi Nochom Eloikim Derech Eretz Pelishtim Kikorov Hu. It was when Paroi sent us out of Mitzrayim, and Hashem did not take us the route of Derech Eretz Pelishtim. The Pasuk says, you know why? Kikorov Hu, because it was near. So Rashi tells us, based on the Pasuk that continues, Kikorov Hu, it's near. V'noyach loshuv ba'osa aderech leMitzrayim. It would have been easy for Klal Yisrael to return to Mitzrayim had Hashem chosen that route out. So it seems that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by design, wanted to choose a route which wasn't necessarily the simplest route. Derech Eretz Pelishtim clearly was the simplest route. Hashem chose not the simplest route. Why? Because he wanted to avoid a situation where Klal Yisrael would meet difficulty, namely fighting the Pelishtim, who would have kicked up a fuss. And in fighting the Pelishtim, Klal Yisrael would have at that point turned around and run back to Mitzrayim. So you know what, says Hashem? Let's choose a different route that doesn't carry that type of difficulty. That's what seems to be, right? Well, did it work? Hashem took us a different route. True. But we ended up by the Yam Suf, and that was pretty difficult. So what's going on here? And to compound this further, the Das Keinim in Paleatosis has a very interesting pshat in the words Kikorov Hu. You see, the way Rashi learns and most Mefarshim learn, Kikorov Hu is translated because it's near, because it's the easier route, and it would have therefore been easy for Klal Yisrael to reverse back to Mitzrayim. The Das Keinim in Paleatosis says, Koloima ha'om korov shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, shenemar lebnei Yisrael am korovai. Based on the Pasuk in Tehillim, the Das Keinim says that Kikorov Hu means because Klal Yisrael are close to Hashem. So because Hashem and Klal Yisrael are close, therefore Hashem took us this way. What's it all about? What's going on? This is our first question on Parshas Beshalach. And the second question goes like this. We'll get into the detail of this later, but we all know the story of what happened, and we all know that when they were standing by the Yam Suf, there was no way through, and Nachshon ben Aminodov was the guy who jumped in, and then Hashem split the sea. So my question is, was there a plan B? What would have happened had Nachshon ben Aminodov not jumped in? What would have happened then? And you'll see why it's an important question. Okay, so there's a gewaldige introduction to Parshas Beshalach by Rabbeinu Bachai, where he works off the Pasuk in Mishlei, which we're only going to partially quote, U'boichem libois Hashem. Mishlei Yud Zayin Gimel. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a boichem libois. He tests people's hearts. He tests us to see where we're holding. Now Rabbeinu Bachai says, you know, when it comes to tests in this world, as human beings, we tend to know of tests, whether it's a school setting or scientific setting. We tend to think of tests as a way of working out an outcome. We're not sure, so we give a test. And based on the results of the test, you arrive at the conclusion. Says Rabbeinu Bachai, the obvious fact. Hashem doesn't need to do any tests. Hashem knows exactly where everyone is holding and what's in everyone's heart. So what is a test? So he first of all says that there's a purpose of a test for the rest of the world. Because let's say there's a tzaddik that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows is a genuinely righteous man, but the people around don't necessarily know that. So Hashem gives the tzaddik a test And by doing so, it puts the person through his paces, so to speak, which thereby brings awareness to everyone around, and everyone goes, oh wow, this guy's really, really big tzaddik. And so what? What does that mean, anything? Because when they are thereby inspired by this tzidkus of this person, that brings them to want to do better themselves. In other words, by testing a tzaddik, it creates a kiyum Hashem. Hashem is sanctified in this world, and it creates an imperative for others who observe that to want to come close to Hashem. Okay? So that's the first thing Rabbeinu Bachai says, as the purpose of a test is, as we said, not to discover an outcome that was previously unknown, but rather to bring out the tzidkis of a person that other people may not recognize, and thereby create a Kiddush Hashem. But he continues, regarding the nisyonos, regarding the tests of Klal Yisrael during their travels in the Midbar. Kishiyotzu miMitzrayim, says Rabbeinu Bachai, Roi v'nisim asher nasu lehem b'Midbar hayu kedei livchoi nes libam. The purpose of the tests and the hardship as Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim was to test their heart. Ulahaviyom lidei nisoyin kinin kriyas Yam Suf, like to bring them to nisoyin, like was by kriyas Yam Suf. And he explains in a particular way what was the difficulty by the Yam Suf. And I said we'll expound on this soon, but what the difficulty by the Bachai speaks out is the Yam Suf didn't all split in one go. It split bit by bit. So as they were going into the Yam Suf, they were literally going into a situation where there was raging water in front of them, and it split a bit more, and it split a bit more, and it split more. So every step of the way was literally a test. Why? What was the purpose? Why do you have to do that, says Rabbeinu Bachai? You know why? To get Klal Yisrael used to living on a level of bitachon, of relying on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is perhaps more relevant to us people, right? We're not tzaddikim, we're not here to be great examples. Well, we should be great examples, but we're not necessarily going to be people that others are going to learn from just because we go through a difficult time. But what we can be is we can grow from tests and hardship. And it's the same as when you go to the gym. And you go to the gym and you push yourself. And what you do when you push yourself is you strengthen your muscles. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts us in a difficult situation, gives us a test, he's pushing us to react, to respond, which thereby strengthens the very muscle that we respond with. And in this case, it was emunah mitochen HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Says Rabbeinu Bachai, Hashem wanted them to go through the Yam Suf, to be faced with difficulty, so that they strengthen the emunah mitochen in Hashem. Now, with that in mind, we kind of have a perspective now as to what's going on at the beginning of the Sedra. Hashem has to choose a route of how Klal Yisrael should leave Mitzrayim. The way Hashem is choosing this route is with a test in mind. Hashem wants to make sure that Klal Yisrael will be tested because they're going to grow in their emunah bitochen. Ultimately, that's the purpose of the whole thing. Hashem's not looking to give us an easy ride. Hashem's looking to give us an experiential ride, a ride that we grow from. Kikoroivhu, precisely because, like the Dazkenim says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is close to us. We are close to Hashem. Because of that relationship, Hashem wants it to be a meaningful journey, one that we're going to grow from. But it has to be a test that we're going to grow from, a test that we're going to react correctly to. It seems that Hashem made the calculation like this: to go derech Eretz Pelishtim and have Klal Yisrael face the mighty army of Pelishtim, that would be too hard for Klal Yisrael. That's a test that's already pushing Klal Yisrael beyond where they're able to withstand. So you know what? We won't go that way. Rather, we'll go the Yam Suf, not because the Yam Suf was a situation where all difficulty was to be avoided. Not that the Yam Suf was somehow going to be this easy ride out. No, there was still a test, but a test that was in reach, a test that was on their level. And what was the test? To face it with calmness and with emunah. Okay, fine. But now let's take a closer look at the actual scene of the Yam Suf. As we know, the Yidden left Mitzrayim. It was boiling hot. bundle of matzah on their shoulders, a bit of dough, and they make their way out, largely on foot, in the heat, as a big caravan, big group of people. Without exaggeration, there were millions of children and millions of donkeys. The donkeys laden, everyone had 90. Can you imagine for one moment, just think about the noise. Fine, they make their way. Off they go. On the instruction of Hashem, leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu, it's all fine and dandy for a day or two. And then they reach the Yam Suf. And it was absolute chaos. The psukim themselves, the words of the psukim describe with dramatics, with detail, the chaos that reigned. Vayirdufu Mitzrayim acharem. This is a people that have been enslaved for hundreds of years. They've been now through 12 months of Makkahs where they've seen the Yad Hashem. They've had Moshe Rabbeinu come and tell them the glorious days that lie ahead. He has instilled them with hope. They've had emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu vayam in ha'am. And now we've finally made the point at which we're leaving Mitzrayim behind us. Gewaldig. Only a day or two and they turn around and they're pelting behind them. Vayirdufu Mitzrayim acharem. Vayasigu oisom, the Mitzrayim are catching up with them. Choynim alayom, Klal Yisrael, camping by the sea. Kol sus rechev paroi voroshov. Paroi had brought out every bit of his army that you can think of. And the psukim continue. Paroi hikrif, Paroi is coming closer. V'hinei Mitzrayim l'sei acharem. Vayiru moed, Klal Yisrael are terrified. Are you surprised? What a frightening idea that the army, that the people, the nation they just left, who used to enslave them for hundreds of years, are now chasing after them with every bit of weaponry possible. Vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael Hashem, the crowd to Hashem. And in this moment, as I say, of chaos, of fear, let's add in what the Gemara in Yerushalmi in Tainis tells us, but all the Midrashim say this similar idea as well. That there was a disagreement within the ranks of Klal Yisrael as to how to respond to this situation. Says the Yerushalmi in Tainis, Arba Kitim Nasa Vesin Al Yam Suf, there were 4 groups of people. Achas Emeres Nipoi Layam. One group argued, let's go forward into the sea. What's better? Turn around and turn into mincemeat by the army behind us, or turn ahead and go ahead into the sea? The second group says, Achas Emeres Nachshon Mitzrayim. You know what? Let's pack it in, let's just go back. The third group said, Nasei Ma Milchama, let's fight, don't forget. According to the simple pshat, Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim, Chamushim, they left armed, they had armory. Let's go, let's fight the Mitzrayim. And the fourth one, sounds a bit strange if you ask me, but it's Nitzaveach Kenegon, let's shout. Let's shout at the Mitzrayim. Okay, I don't know what it means. It doesn't mean tefillah, I don't know what it means. You know the famous phrase, yeah? 2 Yidden in a room, 3 opinions. Massive folk, massive millions of people gathered together here, and you've got 4 huge different groups of people who think very differently about what to do. You can only imagine that the back and forth that was going on in that moment. Again, remember the noise, yeah? Remember the background here. Forget any panic, forget any chaos. Just the children, the families, the belongings. You're talking about a real Yiddish Amais over here. And in that you insert the Vayiru Ha'am, they were scared. Insert the fact there's a difference of agreement. The whole thing is like, what on earth do we do? And in that situation steps forward Moshe Rabbeinu, our leader. Okay? And the Yerushalmi tells us, Moshe Rabbeinu addresses each of the groups of Klal Yisrael. Zu sha'amra nipo layam. To the group that said, let's fall into the sea. Amalen Moshe tells them, Hisyatzvu uru'u es Yeshuas Hashem. Don't go anywhere. Stand and see the salvation of Hashem that's about to come. To the second group, Zu sha'amra nachzim Mitzrayim, the ones that said, let's turn around and go back. Yerushalmi quotes the psukim, the continuation of the psukim. Moshe Rabbeinu tells them, Ki es asher re'isem es Mitzrayim ayim hazeh. You've already seen what happens to Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim are days of old. Forget that. Don't consider going back to Mitzrayim. He addresses a third group. You know the third group that said, let's fight the Mitzrayim? Amalei Moshe, Hashem yilochem lochem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to fight for you. Don't get busy with your ideas. And the final one, I love this one. The final one that's Aveach connect on, the ones that said, let's shout at them, says Moshe Rabbeinu, V'atem tacharishon, you be quiet. But in each of these responses, what Moshe Rabbeinu was communicating to each of the difference of opinions of Klal Yisrael, guys, just calm down. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will sort this out. Okay. So one imagines, if you were a member of Klal Yisrael at the time, you'd be reassured. Okay, at least Moshe Rabbeinu knows what's happening here. Right? Everyone has their opinions, we understand. It gets very heated, okay? It's a difficult situation, but Moshe Rabbeinu, he tells them it's going to be good. It's going to be good. The Gemara in Sotel Amudvav on the base tells us, K'sha'omdu Yisrael al hayam ho'yishvotim menatzchim zeh im zeh. So this is a similar idea to the Medrash. The Shvotim were fighting each other. They each wanted to be the first one to jump into the sea. They recognized that the way forward was going to be jumping into the sea at this point. So they wanted to be the first ones. And Rameh says that Kofat Shivta Shal Binyamin, the entire Shivta of Binyamin were the first ones that jumped in. And they got in and they got a special reward for it according to Rameh. Rabbi Huda says, and this is the famous one we always taught in school, Nachshon ben Aminodov was the only one who jumped in first. It seems that they proceeded to do so based on their own initiative, which is, don't have an answer to this, but it's a little bit strange. But this is what it seems. Klal Yisrael recognized, or Yidden within Klal Yisrael recognized this was the way forward. Whilst these guys were jumping in, what was Moshe Rabbeinu doing at that point? The Gemara tells us, at that point, Moshe Rabbeinu was davening. He was davening like no tomorrow. Ribboni Shloim, help us out of there. HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns to Moshe and criticizes him, and he says, Yedidai tovim bayam. My beloved ones are drowning in the sea, and you're busy davening. And the Gemara records Moshe Rabbeinu's response. Moshe Rabbeinu turns to Hashem, Ribboni Shloim, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? Of course I'm davening. My Lord, he says, Ribboni Shloim, daber b'nei Yisrael v'Yisrael. Which, what the Gemara is saying, is essentially a pasuk in Chumash. The pasuk says, Ma titzak elai, why are you davening? Why are you crying out to me? Daber b'nei Yisrael v'Yisrael, tell everyone to journey. And the Ramban on that pasuk makes it very clear, in case you were doubting what the reason is for Moshe Rabbeinu davening. Says the Ramban, Yudalat Hazvav Shaya Moshe Tzoyikum Espalol. You know why Moshe Rabbeinu was davening to Hashem at that point? Ki lo yoda ma yaseh. Like the Gemara says, Moshe Rabbeinu did not know what to do. And even though Hashem had told him everything, told him I'm going to harden Paro's heart and all the rest of it, he didn't know what to do. Ki hu asvas hayam. He's at the edge of the sea, and the enemy is behind him, they're chasing, and they're reaching Klal Yisrael. This is a real moment of danger. He was davening to Hashem, that Hashem should show him the way. The Ohr HaChaim HaKodesh is famous on these words. The Ohr HaChaim asks, why is the Ribboni Shloim criticizing Moshe Rabbeinu for davening? Isn't this the tradition? This is the very value system with which we live. A Yid is in a situation of a tzorah, a Yid davens. What do you want to do from Moshe Rabbeinu? He's in a situation, doesn't know what to do, he's davening. What's the criticism here? And famously, the Ohr HaChaim explains that Klal Yisrael, in this moment, were in great peril. There was an incredible complaint against Klal Yisrael from up on high, which was a critique of Klal Yisrael where they were holding. As we know from the Medrash, Halalu Oiveh Dezorah, Halalu Oiveh Dezorah, there were still people within Klal Yisrael, unfortunately, who had not completely rinsed themselves of Dezorah. Now, Koyach HaRachamim, says Ohr HaChaim HaKodesh, the ability for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to engage with mercy in this world comes as a result of Maisim Tovim, of good deeds. But now that Klal Yisrael were being criticized for where they were holding spiritually, they didn't have any good deeds left in the bank. And therefore, says Ohr HaChaim HaKodesh, there was no rachamim, there was no mercy available. Ohr HaChaim says the astonishing words that the Rebbeinu Shalom says to Moshe Rabbeinu, "Matitzak alei pirish, ki ein adovo tolu biyodi," says Hashem to Moshe Rabbeinu. It's not dependent on me. Even if I wanted to bring a nest, I couldn't, because I can't engage with Midas Rachmim at this point. Klal Yisrael in a serious situation. So don't daven to me. Says Rebbeinu Shalom Rabbeinu, davening to me will only help if I'm able to engage Benes with Rachmim, with mercy. But I can't, because the bank is empty. There's no mitzvahs left. There's no Ma'asim Tovim left that will be in the support of Klal Yisrael. Daber al b'nei Yisrael, the Yisrael command Klal Yisrael to journey on into the sea, says the Ohr HaChaim, Pirish, Zoyis ha'etzah ya'utza. This is the only etzah available to you, Moshe Rabbeinu, says Hashem. To bring out the tzad ha'chesed v'arachmim again, tell Klal Yisrael, they should strengthen themselves be'emunah b'chol libam, v'yisrael hayam, they should journey into the sea, koidem she'yicholek, before any splitting takes place, because by them going into the sea with such emunah and bitachon, that will bring out the mercy, it will trigger the rachmim, their mesiras nefesh, for the sake of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, be'emunah will trigger the rachmim, which will thereby enable me, says Hashem, to perform the nes. So on the one hand, Moshe Rabbeinu addresses Klal Yisrael, like the Yerushalmi told us, the Yerushalmi laid it out. Moshe Rabbeinu reassured each group of Klal Yisrael, don't do what you think, don't do what you think. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will show us the way. Hashem yilachem lachem, atem tacharishon. These are the words of the Psukim. And Moshe Rabbeinu addressed Klal Yisrael with great confidence. Hashem will sort it all out. On the other hand, in that very moment that Moshe Rabbeinu was reassuring Klal Yisrael, he himself hadn't the foggiest what to do. The Rabban told us, the Gemara told us, Lo yedea ma la'asos. Moshe Rabbeinu had no idea what to do. And Moshe Rabbeinu was davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and even that was wrong. HaKadosh Baruch Hu criticized him for davening. Isn't Moshe Rabbeinu, Chas v'shalom for one to accuse Moshe Rabbeinu of saying such a thing, but isn't Moshe Rabbeinu offering empty reassurances? He's telling Klal Yisrael, don't worry. He's telling your kids are wanting to know things which you're not so confident about yourself. He's saying, yeah, don't want to be all right. But in time, you don't really have a proper answer. But when they're young enough, you can convince them. But it's a bit harder when you're talking about adults. Talking about Klal Yisrael, situation of crisis, situation of panic. They're all very, very anxious. Vahiru. Posuk says they were scared. Moshe Rabbeinu was not going to plapper out some platitudes. Yeah, we'll be all right. Hashem will help us out. In fact, Moshe Rabbeinu said that. Surely he said it because he meant it. But how could he have meant it if he didn't know himself what was going to be? So let's take a step back for a moment. I want to ask you a question. In all honesty, after hearing everything we've laid out on the table, the Ohr HaChaim, the criticism, the situation of Klal Yisrael, the tremendous peril that Klal Yisrael were in this moment, I want to ask you a question. Do you think Hashem was stuck? Do you honestly think for 1 second that the plan at that point was for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to say, guys, it's been a wonderful time together. Since the days of Avraham Avinu, I've really wanted you as a people. I had some great plans, but you screwed it all up. Really sorry. Shalom. Do you really think that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have done? Deserted Klal Yisrael in this terrible situation, let them all be trampled upon by the Mitzrayim. It's too late anyway. They're done. Absolutely not. Of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu had another way. Do we know what it is? I have no idea. We're mere human beings. How are we supposed to know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu's plans were? But guaranteed HaKadosh Baruch Hu had a plan B. Guaranteed. And it was this clarity that enabled Moshe Rabbeinu to be 100% confident in HaKadosh Baruch Hu in that moment. That Moshe Rabbeinu himself could be in doubt as to what to do and yet still have 100% confidence HaKadosh Baruch Hu will sort it out. He can address Klal Yisrael with genuine encouragement, with genuine inspiration, not platitudes, not making up. I know what I'm supposed to say now, Hashem knows what he's doing, but actually I'm not so sure. No, that wouldn't have landed, that wouldn't have worked. Hashem yilochem lochem. You're asking me how this is going to work out. I have personally no idea. In fact, I'm just about to turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and daven to him because I'm not actually sure what's going on here. But that doesn't take away from my 100% confidence HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to work this out. He knew Hashem was going to help even if he didn't know how. And you know what's interesting? The Gemara in Soita Daf Beis compares the finding of a shidduch to Kriyas Yam Suf. Koshin, and the Zavim Kriyas Yam Suf, the Gemara says. The Gemara Pesachim Kuf Yud Ches says, Koshin mezoinus shel adam Kriyas Yam Suf. Mezoinus of a person, parnos of a person, is like compared to Kriyas Yam Suf. Now, the simple pshat of comparing this to Kriyas Yam Suf is that Hashem Kavayochel, as it were, had to work hard by the Yam Suf. He had to upend all of nature to pull off this single most miraculous event of all time, to split the big raging sea of the Yam Suf. And the Mefarshim, especially the Ben Yod and Sota, explains that when it comes time for a person to find their match, it's very important that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has an idea as to who a person should marry based on who they are. So he wants to match them up. But the problem is that people change all the time. So it's a constant work, as it were, right? Obviously this is all metaphorically, but as it were, it's a constant work for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to keep on tabs on where you're holding now, and therefore who's the right shidduch for you now. And there's 8 billion people in the world. So that means all the time, everyone's changing. So there's shidduchim happening all the time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is busy with, right? That's kind of quite a bit of a project for Hashem to be busy with. And Kavayochel, it requires an input and a management to the level that HaKadosh Baruch Hu needed to pull off this ness of the Yam Suf. And I would like to add that the same thing can be applied. The Ben Yoda doesn't say it as far as I know, but the same thing can be applied to Parnosa, because part of Parnosa, although it's guaranteed to every individual, but part of Parnosa depends on the merits of a person, depends on the schusim of a person. And therefore, schusim change, people's behavior changes. So Hashem again is on his toes. It's a work in progress of trying to work out what's appropriate for every person. But you know what else you can draw from this and why it should be a comparison? Because in the same way that by the Yam Suf, Moshe Rabbeinu was able to be 100% confident in HaKadosh Baruch Hu helping Klal Yisrael, even without knowing or having the foggiest as to how, the same thing is true of Shidduchim, and the same thing is true of Parnosa, and for that matter, the same thing is true of every element in our life. Rest assured, you can be confident. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has your back. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in charge. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will work it out. I don't know how. Doesn't matter. You don't need to know how. You don't need to have the answer in order to have emunah in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You don't need to be confident that you've made the right choice with 100% certainty to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will work this out for your benefit. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is on the case. Whatever happens, Hashem has a plan B. So we don't have time to bring this out in the fullest understanding, but Bechira, obviously everybody has. Everybody has free choice. But don't think for a moment that your free choice means Hashem doesn't have a plan. Okay? How the two things go together is a subject for a different time, philosophically. But in practical terms, you make your choices. You have your free choice. Absolutely, go right ahead. But be confident at the same time. Even if you chose plan B, plan C, plan D, don't worry. Hashem has your back. Hashem will make sure things work out to the best they can be for you. So in conclusion, we began today with two questions. The first question we asked was, why did Hashem take the Yidden out of Mitzrayim through the Yam Suf? It sounds like from the opening pasuk that Hashem was trying to choose the easier route, but we asked, was it really easy? And how does it make sense to say Kikoroifu, that Hashem was close to Klal Yisrael in this context? But we explained from Avinu Bachai, no. Kikoroifu, because Hashem was close. Hashem wanted to test us. You know why Hashem wanted to test us? In order for us to grow in emunah and bitachon. That was the purpose of the journey. Hashem wasn't looking for an easy route. He was looking for an easier route. A route that was within the reach of Klal Yisrael. A route that would have landed in Klal Yisrael's reach of being able to withstand the test of emunah and bitachon. Derech Eretz Pelishtim was considered the wrong route in that matter. But the right route, that provided the perfect scenario for Klal Yisrael to be tested and to experience emunah and bitachon by Hashem in a difficult situation. And we asked the second question we began with was there a plan B? If Nachshon ben Aminodov didn't jump in the water, what would Hashem done at that point? And the way we've explained is, obviously there was a plan B. We don't know what it is. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know what it was. But he knew one thing. Hashem has this. Hashem has this sorted. And there's lots we don't know in our life. I mentioned before, the Gemara says Shidduchim, the Gemara says Parnosa, but it, as I say, it applies to every part of life. There's so many moments when we have to progress in life and we're unsure. One thing we can be sure of is irrelevant as to how we choose and to what we do and how we work our way through life. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a plan. He has our back. Everything Hashem does will be for our good. Shkoyach.